Welcome to the Tired of Talking podcast. I am your host, Carmen Rozier, and this is the podcast where we talk about all the things we are tired of talking about that we want to put an action plan to. Come to the place where you can rediscover, recreate, and redesign your life. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 6 of the Tired of Talking podcast. And I'm your host, Carmen Rozier. And you guys know this is the podcast where we talk about all the things that we are tired of talking about, but we want to put an action plan to. And I use that term lightly when I say tired of talking about, but these are just common topics that we hear about on a regular basis that people just kind of talk. But let's get into some action. Today, we're going to talk about grief. The reason I want to talk about grief is because it is inundating our society. As of 2020, it seems like we all have been through an extreme amount of stress imposed by grief. We've experienced loss left and right, across the board, across the country, across the world, globally. So I believe that God has blessed me with insight and fortitude to bring forth a message that may help and guide you, because that is what I'm here to do. I'm here to serve you all. I'm here to serve the people. And I have had my share of extreme amount of loss in my lifetime in dealing with grief. And over that time, I have come across resources and people and tools that have helped guide me in the right direction, that I can even be sitting here before you today in my right mind. And I think I'm in my right mind, but just being able to be before you and be whole and find a sense of joy and purpose in my life. And that is what I want for everyone. That is what I want for you all. And specifically, I believe my voice is designed to help divorced mothers who've experienced an extreme amount of loss, to help you rediscover, recreate, and redesign your life. So we're going to get into the topic of grief as it relates to relationship, but as it relates across the board. And that's one thing that we want to talk about when it comes to grief. What is grief, and why does it happen? What is it? Now, typically when we think of loss, we think of death and dying. That's usually the go-to. But when you experience loss can be in anything. It could be in your job. It could be in any type of transition in life. It could be the loss of a relationship. For me, I want to share my experience as it relates as of recent. In the last 10 years of my life, I have been rebuilding and recreating based off of an extreme amount of loss that I had compounded all at one time. And I remember people used to say to me, how do I do it? Where am I pulling my resilience or, the stick-to-itiveness to want to go on? And I'm just going to say that it was very difficult. The lowest point of my life was not just the fact, 10 years ago that, my ex-husband left. It was a compounding of loss during that time within, I would say, not even 6 months, within a 3-month period, I lost my husband, I lost my job. And when we say lost, not necessarily fired, but I did not work at a company that I built a life in for over a decade. Then I had a car repossessed. I don't know if anybody knows that loss of going outside and looking for your car and it's just not there. That's another story for another day, but that was loss. And then going through a situation with my oldest son who was transitioning into adulthood and him going out on his own and leaving the home. So those were 4 major losses. And then I'm going to add a fifth loss, because even though there was a plan, to obviously reach the limit or my capacity of having children, that was a loss for me when I had to go through a surgery where, fertility has always been a thing that just happens and it's just a choice. And anybody that struggles with that, definitely my heart goes out to you. But it's different for me when I had to have intervention and it was interrupted on my behalf, meaning tubes tied, what would I have? Tubal ligation, all of it, tied, burn, clip, the whole 9. And so then it's just like, something, it was life altering. And then even going through that life altering experience, having my daughter, like I had a near death experience, and all of these things were happening at the same time. And I thank God, oh, but the grace of God, there go I was introduced at the Word Church. So shout out to the Word Church. I was introduced to the concept of grief recovery. So I did have in my tool belt some knowledge or resources on how to process and be aware of the grief that I was experiencing and how I was experiencing it, so that I didn't completely lose my mind. But let's just be honest, and that's what I want to talk about. There were some times where I was questioning everything, because everything in my life just completely changed and was obliterated. If you are experiencing something like that, definitely lean in and listen a little bit closer, because those are the things that could just about clear take people up out of here. And I know that, like I said, in our society, we look left and right on social media. We are inundated with hearing about loss on a daily, and then societal loss. We have mass shootings. We have all kinds of things going on that I just want the people to just have a general knowledge of what we're dealing with when we talk about grief. So like I said, there are phases of grief, and phases are shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, testing, and acceptance. And I'm not going to get into all of those and break them down, but I do want to reiterate and stress the fact that you can be in all of those phases at any given time or all at once. It's a spectrum. Grief is a spectrum, and it's very confusing, and it's very hard to deal with. But just acknowledging the fact that you are aware that there are different phases and levels of your grief that you're experiencing, and that can help you with processing and getting through. And I always say, so that's the first thing that I want you to know, that there are phases and you can be in all at the same time or one. And it's not even wrong. There's nothing wrong with you as you go through that. The second thing that I want you to know is to feel all your feels. Feel your feels. I say feel your feels because, you get these emotions and you start to tell yourself, or you may even question to yourself, what's wrong with me? It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to not be okay for an extended amount of time, whatever your time is. And that's another thing that we hear about when it comes to grief is, okay, it's been long enough, or and I believe that some people ascribe a season or a time frame to grieving. And I know in certain cultures there is that, but I'm here to say and just debunk that whole myth that when you are having your feelings or emotions, there is no time frame. Especially if you're dealing with the loss of a loved one, let me feel how I feel, how I'm feeling it when I feel it. And then being able to processing those feelings, that's a topic that is separate, because there is a healthy way to get through the grief that you're feeling. And then there's an unhealthy way. I always say, or pay attention to some of the behaviors that you are displaying. So being self-aware is very key when you are grieving, and paying attention to what you're doing. In the book that we use, it was called the Grief Recovery Handbook. And it talks about in this book, and it was by John W. James and Russell Friedman. So if you want to pick that up, I recommend it. But it talks about something we call STIRBs. Those are short-term energy releasing behaviors. Now, the only thing about STIRBs that can be detrimental is that is where your addictions can develop. So you want to pay attention to what it is that you are doing. So some people anesthetize their emotions with shopping, hence becoming a shopaholic. For me, that was when I joined a wine club. Wine was the elixir, and I used the Bible left and right to justify that, because I said that was Jesus' first miracle. So he clearly wanted us to have some wine. So let me go ahead and wine down. Let me have this wine. The problem with that is that glass turned into the bottle. And so we were right here bordering alcoholism. So what I needed to be self-aware and say, okay, now wait a minute, Carmen. Now just wait a minute. Now you don't gotta have a whole bottle every day or all the time. So we had to dial that back. But being self-aware, because that could have went left real fast. So you want to be careful with the behaviors that you are demonstrating during this time, but feel all the feels. And I also want to talk about the emotion of guilt and just how you may ascribe guilt, because guilt, depending on the type of loss that you have, can be detrimental, but it can also be helpful in your development on necessarily maybe what not to do in the future. So let me just break that down. If someone dies, you may have a survivor's guilt, depending on the way that they pass, and you have these emotions. And when you feel guilt, the reason I say feel all your feels and be okay with it, guilt is nothing more than placing yourself in that situation and putting a level or sense of accountability on yourself, whether it be misplaced or not. I think that is very rooted and grounded in empathy and accountability, if I can say that, empathy and accountability. So it's okay to have that guilt, but be careful with how that guilt settles, because I have seen and experienced people who have had that guilt and it can be debilitating. So that's why I say, depending on the situation, it can be debilitating. It can be helpful. In my case, like I said, I lost a car. And so then that becomes, okay, now Carmen, how could we have avoided this situation, the loss of a home? What can we do better in finances? And so, you fast forward, sometimes you need extra help. For me, it's getting a finance coach, it's getting a credit coach. So shout out to all of those people, and just being mindful of another situation that when that comes around. So that type of guilt can be helpful when you use your participation in some sort of loss that you may have experienced, and not repeating that cycle. And the third thing that I want you all to know that's very important about grief, that there is no time frame. We just said, I kind of touched on it, but there is no time frame for grief. But I do want you to have a healthy mindset and understanding that although there may be no time frame for grief, I believe that the way you respond to your emotions in the grief over a period of time should be kind of wrangled in. Okay, so what do I mean by that? As you are feeling all your feels, initially when you experience loss, and you may be triggered, and certain triggers may bring up old emotions, but if they bring them up as fresh as day one, then you're finding yourself in a stuck place. And I definitely wholeheartedly encourage you to reach out and touch somebody so they can reach back out and touch you. And what is that? That's a therapist, not necessarily a friend. Sometimes you need a professional if you find yourself over a long period of time being in the same emotional headspace, because honestly, you're stuck. You're held up in that area of, and dare I say, one of the phases that debilitates. So sometimes you need that additional resource or that additional help to help pull you out. So definitely reach out and touch someone. And like I said, the fourth thing is being self-aware. And I think I'm not going in order, but I will go back over this. But being self-aware and making no major life decisions while you are grieving. So that is why you really want to be self-aware. We used to hear, who said this? It was coined a term, and it's from the word church. We said it all the time. When your heart is broken, your head does not work. That phrase right there has changed my life for over the last decade that I was introduced to that. When your heart is broken, your head doesn't work. When you are emotional about anything, that's when you kind of want to pause. Because if you're making decisions from an emotional place, you're being reactive. and then you're reacting from a pain point. And if you can think of, and I'll use the analogy of when you go to the doctor when we were kids, and the doctor took that whatever hammer, we'll call it a hammer, mallet, mullet, whatever. My doctor friends, y'all know, but took that little thing and hit you on the knee, and the reaction, the subconscious reaction was to kick. So if you're making some major life decisions from a pain point, you may not know subconsciously that you are giving kick responses and making kick decisions where you might want to just pause. And I've been guilty of that. So I'm telling you what I have experienced and know. So it's like I went down that road. Don't go down that road. Take the time to process and make sure that you are not making major life decisions from an emotional headspace. And they say sleep on it, and I'm not even gonna say sleep on it. So like I recently made a major life decision to leave corporate America indefinitely and go out on my own. And I had to make sure that even no matter how much, and I mean, the job was pissing me off, and there is no other way to say it. There were things that were happening that were just so unacceptable to me that it's like, why am I continuing to allow myself? And sometimes, you know, you have to. And I just believe so much in myself. I said, I just don't have to. But I wanted to make sure that I was not making the decision to leave right at the time where I was feeling the anger or whatever the emotion was. So just marinating on it, get your journal out, write out your thoughts. Journaling is the best, the best. You know, even if you don't have the best writing skills, so what? And some people use their phones. I'm saying no, pen and paper. There's something about putting pen to paper and actually writing out the letters and writing, even if you have to draw a picture. One of my daughters is so phenomenal. I looked at her journal with her permission, and she had not only words, but she had pictures and she had artwork. She's an artist. So any kind of way that you can get some of the things that are inside out, there's going to be, believe it or not, it's an experiment. Dare me, try it, and then, you know, come back and leave me some comments and feedback. But when you are journaling, you're going to go back and read some things, or some things are going to come out, and you're going to be like, oh my goodness. So make sure that you do that when you're trying to make any major life choices or any type of time that you are experiencing grief or heavy emotions. Get yourself a journal and write some things down. And last, the fifth thing I want you to know, and I said it earlier, seek guidance and get professional help. See somebody. There are people, and I'm not one of them, even though I touched on spiritual guidance counseling. I'm not certified in that area, but I'm so inundated with healing from the inside out and being in touch with their emotions. I can speak to it, having gone through these processes for over a decade. This has been ongoing since about 2005 is when I began grief recovery. And then it just branched off into specifics of different things that I was dealing with as it pertained to any type of major issues that I needed to get counseling in. So seek the counsel that you need to have. If you've already developed or noticed that you have some behaviors or patterns that you have already started to experience and you want to nip that in the bud, or if you already have an addiction, see somebody who specializes in addiction. If you are really having a rough time with dealing with someone that you lost in death and dying, definitely reach out to someone who specializes in grief counsel. And then if you have experienced that loss of a relationship, and I say that that one is very different because it becomes personal when someone walks away from you, like a spouse walked away from me. When someone walks away from you, that becomes a self-esteem and a very introspective process, because everything, and when I say everything, it was my truth, and I believe that I am not the only one. When I say every problem or issue that I had in me that was not dealt with as a child, as an adolescent, those things were peeking out all over, and it was not helpful to my family. I wanted to be a more effective, at that time, employee. I wanted to be a more effective friend, mother, daughter, sister, aunt. I just wanted to be more effective. And I was noticing that my emotions, when they say you wearing your heart on your sleeve, my heart was all over my body. My heart was just everywhere. You just breathe on me the wrong way, I'm gonna have an issue. So I knew that I needed to seek that professional help. You can find it in the form of small group. You can find it here. And this is where I'm going to conclude and invite you all into my community yet again. And when you join my community, look for me on Blessed Trinity, spell with a 3, BLESSED, 3RINITY, on Instagram. Message me and join my community, and we can delve deeper into it. But again, I want to offer that assistance to you. And when you do join the community, leaving your email address, you will receive a free copy of my book, Till My Death Did We Part, The Life, Death, and Resurrection of a Family. And again, I go into a lot of detail about coming out of those murky woods of loss and grief and depression, because I just don't want people to be stuck there. I don't want you all to be stuck there. Be free and live on purpose, and just carve yourself out of those tough, hard places, of those low vibration emotions that drag us down, because there is light. The light never leaves. It's always there. There is always another side. When you're going through a storm, the storm never lasts. When have you ever seen a 365-day storm? You haven't, because there has to be an end to it. And I always encourage my friends, it breaks my heart when I hear about someone who has passed away because they took their own life, because I know that they left this place in the lowest frequency, hopeless. There is no such thing as a hopeless situation. No such thing. There is always, especially if you are at the lowest point of your life. And I have been there. I've had the voices in my head. The lowest point, when you are at that lowest point in your life, that means that the other side is right there. There is always a polar opposite for everything. That is how God set this thing up. So for every negative, there has to be a positive. That's science. And that's the nerd in me. Sometimes when I'm trying to figure out problems or solve problems, I will break out an algebraic equation in a moment and apply variables to people, because that is how I remove things being personal to me and make them impersonal. Because I can get, when I'm not in the forest, when I'm not one of the trees in the forest, I got the best advice. But when it comes to just me, so those algebraic equations come out. I digress. But I just want to make sure that you all know to get that help, tune in, and there is light. There is light. And I'd like to lead you guys into that light. So I'm going to leave you guys with that right there. I look forward to next week's episode. Please tune in, and I will see you all in another week with some more great information, insight, inspiration. I hope that you all are being inspired. And again, I'm your host, and I talk today. I'm your host, Carmen Rosier, with the Tired of Talking podcast, and I help you rediscover, recreate, and redesign your life from the inside out. Let me be your life interior design coach. Be blessed.